In today's video, I'll try and make a super classy pair of dividers completely by hand using just basic tools. I'm no blacksmith, so it's going to be a challenge, but I always enjoy a bit of forging. I did make this practice pair. They're a bit rough and they're not quite right, but they do work. I learned a few things from them as well. So anyway, let's get started, and I'm going to make them from rebar. I really like using materials like this as it's a fun challenge trying to make something elegant from something so rugged. And if forging isn't your thing, I still think it's worth watching as it's an interesting process fitting the two legs together. Also, I reckon blacksmiths should get some love as they're the original trade. All of the others relied on them to make the tools for them. I've set up my forging area. To heat the metal, I'll use my induction forge. It's super convenient, but it doesn't really do anything that any other forge can do. It makes little difference to using a propane or coal forge. It's just fast and easy to use. The bar is a bit too long to handle comfortably, so I'll cut it in half. The first thing I'll do is upset the end of the bar by driving the hot steel into the anvil. This will make the end of the bar swell and give me a touch more material to forge out the top of the first leg. Now that's done, I'll put a shoulder in to define the joint and hinge section at the top of the leg. I'll start to flatten out the rebar, and maybe that's something I could have done as the very first step, but it'll be fine. And as I said at the start, I'm no expert at this, I'm just giving it a go. Next I need to forge in the joint, and on these ones I did it the wrong way around. The wing is over to the left, which would work quite good for a left-handed person, but I want the wing to go this way, which means I have to flip everything around the opposite way. After setting in the shoulder, I'm using a cross-peen hammer to stretch the material out in a sideways direction. I didn't get a very clear shot of this, but hopefully you can see what I'm doing. When it's cooled down a touch, it's at a good temperature to get the inside hinge surface nice and flat. I have left a lot of material on the top, but I'd rather have too much than not enough. If I was more experienced, I could have forged it closer to the final shape. The main thing is getting a good flat surface, which I think I've got, and a fairly consistent thickness. Next, I'll start forging out the legs. If you have any interest in trying something like this yourself, you really do only need a basic setup. That's how I started, and it's surprising what you can do with a piece of railroad track and a basic forge. A cheap propane one, which may not be the best, will get you started, and these days they cost very little. I still need to draw the leg out and taper it, but before I do that, I'll get the second leg up to the same stage. They really don't look like they're ever going to fit together, but don't worry, they will. I'm not quite sure how well yet, but we'll at least get them working. Anyway, next I'll draw out the legs. I'll shape the legs more later on using files. If I was making more of them, I'd make a forming die and hammer them in while hot, but as it's a one-off, files will do the job. Next, I'll do a bit of file work and clean up these shoulders. They fit together better, but they still need to be better than that yet. So what we'll do next is we'll heat one of them up, keep the other one cold, and we'll forge the two together and try and close up some of the gaps. Next I'll heat both legs together and refine them further. I did this a couple of times and it really is surprising how well all the gaps fill in and come together. And in between I did file the inside of the leg straight on one of them for the other one to conform to it. As many of you would know, I rarely do sponsorships. In fact, I haven't done one for years, but I do have a promotion running of my own. And that's not quite right. It's also with my friend, the Samurai Carpenter. We've bundled all of our woodworking plans together to make them more affordable for our fellow woodworkers. The plan bundle includes my Kumiko bedside table plans, mini workbench, plus all of my others. There's 11 premier woodworking plans in total. Plus included in this bundle, you'll also get 15 of the Samurai Carpenter's top tier woodworking plans too. And for a limited time, if you feel like these projects are beyond your current skill set, to help you build confidence, we've added 64 easy to build bonus plans that anyone can build in a weekend using simple tools and simple cuts. So if you click the link in the description while this offer is still available, you can join us in building your next great woodworking project. And as always, thanks for the support. That's the head section roughed out. They need to be a lot more finished than this yet, but it's a start. Next, I'll flatten the inside of the joint where the two halves contact each other. Now I can start cleaning up the outside surfaces. I could have machined these dividers from flat bar, which would have been much easier, and even though I'd enjoy that process too, I think there's something extra special about forging and refining with hand tools. These will definitely look handmade when they're done, but that's where the charm is. The top section around the hinge needs to be flat for the joint to work well, but the legs will taper down to the points. The inside of the legs need to be flat, so I'll deal with that next. They're coming together, but they're still far too bulky. These ones are much more elegant. They're quite a bit smaller. So I'll mark these out again, ready to refine them. But before I do refine them, I'll drill the pivot hole first. Even though I've already made a practice pair, I'm still learning from these. And if I were to make any again, I'd make the effort to forge them closer to the final shape and size. I reckon that's looking much better. Next I'll profile the outside of the legs. I'll start with this one because it's thinner, and then I'll use that one to mark out the other one and match the two together. You could rivet the joint or even keep the bolts, sharpen the tips, and that's already a pair of dividers. But we'll keep going. We'll make them winged, just like these ones, and we'll make the wing next, and we'll forge that from another piece of rebar. I forged the wing on the practice pair way oversized and then I filed it back, but hopefully I can use these as a template and forge a bit closer to the final shape. They're still a bit oversized, but not too bad. I did leave them a bit thicker than I needed to, so that's another thing to improve on if there's ever a next time. I want them down to somewhere between 2 and 2.5 millimeters. Now that they're flattened, I'll mark them out and shape the profile. The top section of the wing doesn't have to be accurate, it just needs to look right, whereas the main radius of the wing really does need to be quite precise. It still needs a bit more refining, but it'll do for now. Next, I need to make a slot on the inside of the leg for the wing to pass through. I've made a dowel with a center point so I can mark the outside radius onto the leg, and then I can transfer that round to the side and mark out the slot. I can mark out one side of the slot, then a ruler is the perfect thickness to mark a center line, and using another ruler I can mark out the other side of the slot. I'll drill a series of 2mm holes close to each other, and to prevent the drill bit from breaking if it does go into the next hole, I've modified a cheap drill bit into a stub drill. I've chopped it down, leaving only a small section of the flutes, making it much stiffer, and then reground the tip by hand on a diamond stone. I need to chisel away between those holes, and then I can get a needle file in there and clean that hole up. I made a small chisel from a piece of high-speed steel just to do the job, and I put that in a piece of mild steel round bar for the handle. On these ones here, I didn't drill anything, and the hole doesn't even come all the way through. I just used the chisel and I just chiseled away at it and took a little bit out at a time, and I did manage and got it done. But with this one with the holes in there, it should be a lot easier. That worked great. It only took a minute, and with the through holes, this is much faster than how I did the other pair. This end's obviously far too wide and needs refining, and this one is too long, so I need to take a bit off there. I need to find the exact position or something very close to it, and then I can mark it and cut it off. This outside radius has still got a little bit extra left on as well. Needs to go that way a touch. The end needs a straight section to fit the slot. I'll mark it out and then file it to fit. That's close to fitting across the end, but next I need to work on the thickness, and this will also get it nice and flat. That's in the ballpark, so next I'll fit the other end. I'm using dividers to help work out the position of the wing, and then I can mark it out. Now I need to remove this section, which I could easily do on the milling machine, but to keep with the challenge of basic tools, I'll do it by hand. I made a simple chisel from spring steel in a mild steel handle. It doesn't look the best, but it works well, and it only took 10 minutes to make, including heat treating. It's not much different to using a wood chisel, it just removes less material. I'm sure that the milling machine is looking on and thinking, I'm here and I'm ready to go. What are you doing? But what I am doing is enjoying myself. It took about 20 minutes, which I didn't think was too bad at all. It just needs a bit more refining to get it to fit. The wing is slightly raised, so I'll clean up the recess and get it flush. It doesn't need much, I just need to remove the high spots. Now I need to remove a section in the other leg to give clearance for the wing. It's really starting to look nice. I still need to make the nut which will clamp onto the wing, but before I do that, I'll add some shape to the legs by filing in some bevels. I reckon the bevels look great. Next I'll clean up the round section around the joint. When they're opened and closed they don't quite line up. It's an easy fix though. I just need to keep opening them in a different position to expose a high spot. File that away, keep doing that, and eventually it'll all match up. That's much better. I'll just file in a couple of details in the transition from the round section to the straight, and then I'll move on to making the nut. I'm trying to show the entire process, which is a huge amount of work, both filming and editing. It also makes the video much longer, maybe twice as long as it could have been. It does make me wonder if I'm showing too much, but I'd love to hear what you think. Before I thread the nut, I'll make the thumb screw and then I'll thread both of them. I'll make it from a piece of 6mm mild steel bar. On the practice pair, I used the tap and die with the finest thread I had, a 0.8mm pitch. It works well, but a finer thread would be better, so I bought an M5 tap and die with a 0.5mm thread pitch. It really is a super fine thread. You can see the difference next to the other one. That's working nicely, so next I'll add some shape to it. It certainly looks handmade, but I'm happy with that. I think it looks great. The nut on the back does need shaping still to the wing, but before I do that, I think I need to fix the wing in place and pin it so it's in the correct position. But before I do that, I think I need to clean up all these faces. I think it'd be a lot easier to do without the wing there. I won't be using any sandpaper on the legs. I'll go for a finish straight off a smooth file. The holes need a slight taper, so when the pins are peened, they'll fill the taper and lock in permanently. This old countersink bit is perfect for the job, and it doesn't need to remove much for this to work. For the pins, I'll just use a nail. I will file the pins flush, but I'll pin the end of the wing and leave that as it is for a feature. Next, I'll start refining the fit between the wing and the nut. You can see that looks a lot closer, but hopefully I haven't gone too far. I still need to put a bevel on this outside radius of the wing and an opposing bevel on the nut, so when that clamps down it locks onto it. Also, the edge of the nut is straight as well, and I need to put an inside radius on that to match the wing. I'll file a bevel onto the wing next, and then it will be a bit of backwards and forwards and testing and fitting until the nut fits just right. I'll keep taking more off the edge of the nut until it seats a bit lower and makes better engagement with the wing. The better the fit, the better it'll lock in place. A Sharpie helps to highlight the high areas and where to remove material. It's actually functioning pretty well as it is, but I'm aiming for it to be even better. I'm happy with how consistent the action is across the wing, so I'll work on the nut and get that to a good fit as well. I haven't really shown it here, but I did this many times and took about 20 minutes to get it just right. They really work very well. In fact, they're just about perfect, and it's amazing how good you can get things with just hand tools. Anyway, let's make some brass washers and get the whole thing finished and put together. I've got a scrap of brass and a hole saw to get them started. This will be a lot easier to make on the lathe from bar stock, but we'll keep it nice and simple and we'll do it on the drill press. The hole saw I'm using is the nearest to the size that I need. It leaves a 28mm disc and I need it to be 25mm. It's easy enough though to file them down to size. That's the washers done. I just need to make a pivot pin, which I'll make from the same bar I forged the wing from. This would have been another perfect task for the lathe, but I think it's pretty cool that it can be done with just tools that most of us have. I'm using a drill press, but it wouldn't be any problem at all to do this with a cordless drill. I'm using my Neroc carbide peening hammer. I love this thing. It's not very big, but with the carbide insert, it really packs a punch. You could definitely do this much faster with a heftier hammer, but I prefer to do this slowly and not distort things too much with too heavy a blow. They're a bit tight, but they'll loosen up easy enough by working them and adding a drop of oil. I went over the whole thing and cleaned them up some more with a smooth file, but I won't bore you with too much of that. I think they're looking amazing, but there's still one last thing to do, and that's heat treat the tips. I'm just using a blowtorch, heating them to an orange colour and then quenching them in vegetable oil. Being rebar, they are only medium carbon steel, but the heat treating will still make the points brittle and susceptible to breaking. I'll clean the ends to allow us to see the temper colours running through, and to temper them I'll heat them from an inch or so back behind the tips and wait for a straw colour to reach the points. I then cool them in water to suspend that state. If you're not sure what's going on here, we're just making the tips slightly softer but stronger at the same time, and in a fairly controlled way, leaving them still hard enough to do the job. They work great, and even though I'm really happy with them, there is one thing I don't think I got quite right. I think the section here has come down too far. It's too big. On the other pair, they're too high, so I think I needed to be somewhere in between. But anyway, I still love both of them. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, the original practice pair I'm going to give away, I'll run that on Patreon, so check that out if you're interested. I absolutely love the project. I really enjoyed making them. They're not perfect. There's bits of forging you can see there. There's a few stray file marks, but I think that adds to the charm. And to think that they were made from rebar and almost completely by hand. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.